Ooh. Uh-oh. Ta-da! Hello friends, welcome to my channel, Eric Perkins Artist. In this video, we dive into advanced coloring with the amazing set of Castle Art 72 colored pencils and page 3 of my fantasy coloring book. Get ready to unleash your creativity and take your coloring skills to the next level. This video seemed like the perfect time to unbox and try out these colored pencils that I received as a Christmas gift. I struggled a little bit to open the tin because I did not realize it was hinged at the top. This is a handy feature that will keep you from losing the lid, although it almost caused me to bend the tin itself. There is a printed color guide inside the lid and on the back of the tin. Oh look! They gave us instructions for coloring the cover art. The image can be downloaded and printed from the Castle Art website. Here's a chart of all the colors Castle Art has and which products those colors are available in. Nice! The set comes with art tips including color mixing and shading just like I'm doing in this video. The color pencil tester sheet is my favorite addition to the set. I usually have to draw or print my own. Once you manage to get a hold of them, the elastic handles on the trays make it way easier to pull them out. Those finger grips work too, but the elastic handles are a nice addition. Now that we have our tools out, let's talk about advanced coloring. Advanced coloring uses multiple hues to represent a color as it transitions from light to shadow. For the demonstration, I am creating a golden sphere with a light purple rim light. Whatever color or material we want to simulate in our coloring will follow a similar pattern with different color choices. I start by lightly sketching the circular outline of the sphere, roughing in the cast shadow and sketching the shadow line on the sphere with yellow ochre light. Using burnt umbers, I gently define the shadow line on the sphere, the mass of the cast shadow, and begin to define the form of the sphere through the darker areas. As I become more confident of the form, I use additional pressure to further define those areas. Switching to Chinese Orange 026, I gently lay in the shadow areas. The red tint of this color will help to turn the lighter yellows to orange and warm the burnt umber, bringing the colors together. I bring back the yellow ochre light 010 to lay in the general hue of the sphere. This color covers most of the area, falling off only where lighter yellows and white will define the bright spots and highlight area. Brilliant Yellow 009 is used to unite the colors and push closer to the highlight area. I'm continuing to use light pressure and gradually define the form of the sphere. Switching to Lemon Yellow Light 001, I define the highlight area which will be untouched, allowing the page white to show through before lightly coloring over the other yellow areas to help blend everything together. This light layering of colors is an important part of the process as it allows all of the colors to blend smoothly together during the final burnishing stage. Now I begin working through the colors, applying more pressure to my shading to deepen the colors and value transitions from light to dark on the lighter side of the sphere. While I am pressing harder with the pencil, I'm not using the full pressure I'm capable of yet. That comes later. Now that the light side of the sphere is nearly complete, I begin adding color to the dark side. I start with the yellow ochre light, as it is the darkest of the yellows I'm using, and while we want to have color in the dark side, we do not want it to be anywhere near as bright as the light side. Working through the darker colors, I switch to the Chinese Orange to add a lot of reddish hue to the dark side of the sphere before using the burnt umber to dull down the hue and darken the value of that area. Notice that I have left a large circular area largely untouched. This is where our reflected light and rim lighting will be added. Brilliant yellow makes a brief appearance to help saturate the dark side of the sphere, lightly blend the darker colors together, and begin to define the area of the reflected light. I am using ivory black to sketch in the darkest line of the sphere's shadow area and deepen some of the values on the darker side of the sphere. Note that the black is used very sparingly. This is immediately followed with more of the burnt umber, which helps to blend the black into the lighter browns of the dark side. Then another quick application of black to really establish the black line of the shadow transition. I bring back Chinese orange to further deepen the colors on the dark side of the sphere, which is looking somewhat bronze at this stage. Adding a bit more with the three yellows helps to bring the color back toward gold while still maintaining the open area that we have reserved for that reflected light. Burnt umber keeps coming back to help dull down the colors and keep the area darker than the light side. Purple light finally comes into play as I sketch in the rim light with fairly hard pressure and lightly lay color into the reflected light area. The color is far too vibrant, of course, so I begin a dance between all of the colors, knocking down the purple light and building it back up as needed. Satisfied with the darker side of the sphere, I set about working with the Chinese orange and the three yellows on the lighter side to further define the golden orange color I desire for this sphere. Now that the sphere is well defined, I bring back the ivory black to draw the deepest part of the cast shadow, switching to burnt umber and blending out from the core. Chinese orange adds some warm red to the cast shadow, and again, the burnt umber helps to dull that color down a bit. I gently lay down a layer of purple light to represent the presence of the rim lighting on the ground plane. As a final touch, I grab one of the darker blues to shade in the background behind the sphere and a warm gray to add a bit of color and texture to the ground plane. Not quite satisfied with the darkness of the cast shadow on the ground plane, I bring back ivory black to darken that area some more and burnt umber for some final touches to the dark side of the sphere. This coloring technique falls short of realism but adds a lot of depth and possibility to your coloring. With that out of the way, let's get started on the actual page. The colors I am using in the sky are Cool Gray 065, Mulberry 039, Lavender 036, and Purple 029. I typically prefer to begin working with the background of my image, so here I am starting with the sky. As I mentioned in my Basic Plus coloring video, grays and blacks can be used to lower the vibrance of a hue, and since I want the sky to be a lot less vibrant than the fireball and characters, I use Cool Gray 065 to color in everything except the clouds. I add extra clouds by leaving white areas in the sky, and I leave a light area around the fireball for an added glow effect. I stop working on the background for just a moment and I bring in Brilliant Yellow 009 to color in the loose embers of the fireball and add a little bit of color to the glow area around it. Returning to the Cool Gray 065, I darken some of the values in the sky, reshape some of my added clouds, and add a light gray tone to the clouds themselves. With the gray established, I switch to Purple 029 and lightly scribble in some color over the clouds. With Lavender 036, I add a base color to the sky itself, helping to shape and define the edges of the clouds a bit more. Using Mulberry 039, I add the darkest parts of the sky with firm pressure and lightly blend outward into the purple areas. I catch some small spots of sky that I skipped, such as those inside the form of the wizard's necklace, and I quickly touch those up with the same process we just used in the sky. After deepening the color of the sky with Mulberry 039, I turn back to Lavender 036 and soften the edges of the clouds while also deepening their color. The clouds are made a bit more vibrant with more of the purple 029, and I work between all three colors to color and darken the entire sky, keeping the left side of the page darkest to enhance the contrast with the fireball. I continue to leave a small light space around the fireball for a glow effect. With the sky finished, I drop down to the bottom of the page, working on the storage area under the deck, where there are crates and barrels stored, and which also includes twin pillars to support the deck area. I use ivory black 071 to fill in any deep spaces that would be completely dark, and lightly color all of the barrels and crates with a base of cool gray 065. Starting with the deepest barrel, I use ivory black 071 to shade it in grayscale before switching to mulberry 039 to add a dark violet color to the darkness and to the darker parts of the barrel. Van Dyke Brown 069 is used to add the wood color to the barrel, starting with light pressure and working toward harder blending pressure in the darker areas. Indigo Light 045 is used lightly in the rim of the barrel and blended in with firm pressure on Cool Gray 065. The most forward section of the rim is left lightly colored, giving it a slightly shiny metallic look. Ivory Black 071 is used again to deepen the darkest area under the rim of the barrel, and Cool Gray 065 is applied to help blend that color in. I repeat this coloring process on the rims of all of the barrels, shading them in with Ivory Black 071, adding a bit of Indigo Light 045 for a metallic blue, and blending them together with Cool Gray 065, leaving light or white spots where they are most likely to be catching any light in the scene. Next, I do the barrels, shading with Ivory Black 071, Mulberry 039 for deep color shadows, and Van Dyke Brown 069 for the overall tone of the barrels. The crates come next, and the process is similar to the barrels. I start by shading the crates in Ivory Black 071, with the recessed panels being darker than the trim, and leaving the panels on the right side of the crate lighter than those on the left side. Next comes Mulberry 039 to add a deep color to the panels, while I use the Indigo Light 045 as the deep color on the smaller trim boards. Van Dyke Brown 069 makes up the overall tone of the crate panels, and I use Sepia 070 on the trim, giving the two elements a slightly different look from each other. The pillars are now all that remain on the bottom section of the page, and I start by lightly toning them with Cool Gray 065. Next, I shade the pillars with Ivory Black 071, defining their darkest and lightest areas, and adding the suggestion of forms. Using Sepia 070, I very lightly add some brown tones to the pillars and begin working the color from the darkest shadows to the lightest areas. Continuing onward, I grab Burnt Umber 068 and begin to deepen the brown content of the blackest areas of the pillars, working gently towards the light. At this point, I do a bit of back and forth between the Burnt Umber 068 and Sepia 070, defining the shape and shadows of the pillars. I found some of the angles awkward, so I apologize for flipping the page so much at this stage. I make it a point to do less of this through the rest of the video. With the dark tones established, I add Cinnamon 012 as the lightest wood color for the pillars. Working through these three brown colors and Ivory Black for the darkest dark, I finish defining the right pillar and add a bit of Brilliant Yellow 009 as a rim light from the fireball. Technically, the light from the fireball would not reach this area, but I made the artistic choice to use it to help separate the pillars from the barrels and crates. Moving to the left pillar, I make the colors a bit deeper and the shadows more pronounced than I did on the right pillar, although I am still using the same process. Traveling upward, I tackle the edge of the deck boards, starting with a light tone of Cool Gray 065. I lend a bit more depth to the black lines and add more texture lines to those board edges with Ivory Black 071. The wood is further colored in, shaded, and textured with burnt umber 068. Because the edges of these boards are meant to be darker than the top of the deck, I did not use the sepia or cinnamon on this section. Continuing our upward journey, it is time to tackle the deck boards. Because these deck boards are being lit by the light source in the scene, as well as the fireball being cast by the wizard, they are not being started with cool gray. I do want to add a slight suggestion of additional illumination from the fireball though, so I lightly sketch a circle on the deck in dark umber 068 to represent the area that light will extend to. How big or small this circle is drawn really depends on how powerful you want the light from the fireball to be. I add some cast shadow from the railing on the right side of the image with burnt umber 068 and deepen it with ivory black 071. Switching back to burnt umber 068, I lightly blend outward from the darkest portion of the deck toward the center, stopping at the edge of the wizard's boot. Switching to the left side of the deck, I add the darkest areas with the burnt umber, again stopping at the edge of the wizard's other boot, before adding a subtle shadow area at the base of the railing with ivory black 071. With sepia 070, I lightly sketch a larger circle on the deck, which is meant to be a transitional area between the brightest light of the fireball and an area of no effect. I then proceed to color the deck boards outside that circle with the sepia 070. Inside the circle, I use cinnamon 012, coloring to the edge of the inner circle. I decide that I do not like having that clear circular shape, so I continue to shade lightly into the circle in a rough pattern, as well as following along the lines of the wood grain and edges of boards to break up the circle just a bit more. I use brilliant yellow 009 to lightly add color to the area illuminated by the fireball. I finish off the deck boards using burnt umber 068, sepia 070, and cinnamon 012 to shade and enhance the wood texture. The same wood colors are used in the boards of the ship's bow. These boards are layered, so I allow the upper board to cast a slight shadow on the board directly below it. The bow and deck are separated by metal trim, and those are up next. The metal trim is colored with ivory black 071, indigo light 045, and cool gray 065. I apply a bit of brilliant yellow 009 in any areas that I think will be catching or reflecting light from the wizard's fireball. First, I tone the rail with ivory black, creating a grayscale base to color on. Second, I smooth the grayscale a little bit more with the cool gray. The indigo light is laid down heavily in the black areas and lighter as we move toward the white of the paper. Finally, I add just a little touch of brilliant yellow to the very edges of the white area to suggest a hint of light from the fireball. Note that using the same colors, you will get slightly better metallic results by applying the indigo light over the black and then using the cool gray to blend, which is opposite of what I actually just did in this part. Repeat the process for the rest of the metal trim pieces in the bow of the ship and the large metal rails at the top. Note, however, that the leaf-shaped cutouts in that railing should be showing the background elements through them. For the most part, the background is the lavender color we used in the sky. At this point, I decided to quickly color in the mountains of the background with the same colors as the sky: mulberry, lavender, and purple. Mulberry for the dark shadow areas of the mountains forms, lavender for the overall color, and purple as a vibrant rim lighting along the top edge. The final element of the background is the prow of the ship, which is a sort of sculpted figure with hair. For this coloring, I chose to have that piece carved out of wood with the same colors as our deck boards. Again, using ivory black to create my grayscale base, burnt umber for the darkest wood areas, sepia for medium color, and cinnamon for the lightest wood. Lastly, I apply some brilliant yellow as a rim light from the fireball along the left side and as a reflected light in various areas of the hair shapes. With all of the background elements handled, it is time to get on to my favorite part of the image, the figures and the fireball. The fireball is a bit more simple, using only 2 colors and the white of the page. Scarlet Red 022 and Brilliant Yellow 009. I start by applying the Brilliant Yellow to the outer edges and general forms of the fireball, easing pressure and color as I move closer towards the center. With the yellow laid in lightly, I use the Scarlet Red to outline all of the forms and lightly blend into the yellow, which creates a fiery orange transition. By lightly applying the Scarlet Red, we can come back with firm pressure on our Brilliant Yellow to burnish the colors and create strong blending tones. Repeat this process with the central fireball as desired. With the fireball colored in, I realized that the glow effect in the sky around the fireball was not the best choice, so I go ahead and color that area back in with lavender and mulberry. Next up, I add some Brilliant Yellow 009 along the edges and planes of the wizard and the cleric that I think will be catching direct light from the fireball. I'm not using a lot of pressure here. This is just a light coating for now, which I will probably firm up and blend in at the end. The wizard's outer robe is colored with Oxide of Chrome 063, Mulberry 039, Delft Blue 041, and Ultramarine 043. I start with the Oxide of Chrome, creating a value scale just like we have done with Ivory Black previously. You might call it a green scale. I shade the entire robe like this, using firmer pressure and darker tone in the darkest shadow areas and allowing the color to fade out to pure white in the lightest areas. My second step is to use Ultramarine, the lightest color of the robe, to lightly blend the Oxide of Chrome. Focusing on the forearm of the robe to demonstrate the full process, I apply harder pressure with Ultramarine in the very dark areas to make sure those shadows are blue rather than green. Next, I get our actual dark color, Mulberry, and really punch in the darkest areas of the robe, which is creating a violet-brown color as the Mulberry and Oxide of Chrome mix together. I bring in the Delft Blue to add midtones and finish off with the Ultramarine, leaving small, sharp white highlights to suggest that the robe is a shiny material. I will return to deal with the yellow lighting later on, but first, I repeat this process throughout the entire robe. Next, I focus on the wizard's tunic and hood. For these, I use Burnt Umber 068, Aubergine 028, and Scarlet Red 022. I will also add some reflected light from the fireball with a good amount of pressure on the Brilliant Yellow 009, since this area is very close to the fireball. Burnt Umber establishes my value scale and the darkest areas of the tunic. A light coating of Scarlet Red begins to set the overall color, and Aubergine is used to bring in the medium hues of the robe. Scarlet Red comes back in again with more pressure. I should have made the inner and folded over parts of the wizard's robe darker with more contrast than I actually did here. For this portion, I used Cadmium Red 024 to establish a red gradation, Brilliant Yellow 009 to tint any highlight areas, Aubergine 028 for the darkest values, and Cherry 027 for midtones. Being unhappy with the red, I burnished the area with Cobalt Turquoise 048 and Ultramarine 043 in the darkest areas to make it more of a violet color instead. I color the wizard's hat the same as his robe. The process is the same. Set the tone with Oxide of Chrome, Mulberry 039 for darks, Delft Blue 041 for middle colors, and Ultramarine 043 for the lightest areas. I will come back to the shapes after dealing with the band of the hat, which I decided to make gold. The gold is made with Burnt Umber 068 for darks and value scale, Burnt Ochre 014 for mid-browns, Brilliant Yellow 009 for bright gold, and Lemon Yellow 005 for pale yellow near the white highlights. We will use this mixture for gold again in the rings that segment the wizard's sleeves and in the trim around the wizard's belt. Going back to the shapes in the wizard's hat, I quickly color them in with assorted colors. I use Burnt Ochre 014 for the diamonds, Brilliant Yellow 009 for the stripes, Scarlet Red 022 for the star, and I left the moon white. After coloring the trim on the wizard's sleeves and belt with that gold color we used previously in the hat, I proceed to color the inner panels of the belt. With Mulberry 039, I darkly sketch some indentation patterns and apply a little bit of shading. Next, I tone the panels with Oxide of Chrome 063 before blending and burnishing the area with Cool Gray 065. I go over the dark recessed areas with Burnt Umber 068, and finally I touch up the darkest spots with Ivory Black 071. The wizard's pants get a similar gray color to that of the belt, but this time I shade the pants and set the darkest parts with Ivory Black 071. I add mid-tones with Oxide of Chrome 063 and lighter shading with Cool Gray 065. As usual, Brilliant Yellow 009 is used along the back edges for rim lighting. I make the wizard's boots a golden brown color, so I'm using the same mixture as the previous gold. Burnt Umber 068, Burnt Ochre 014, Brilliant Yellow 009, and Lemon Yellow 005, in order of the darkest to lightest colors. The colors I use in the wizard's skin are Aubergine 028, Sepia 070, Yellow Ochre Light 010, and Primrose Yellow 002. Starting with the hands, I color them darkest at the core and lightest towards the edges, kind of like burning wood, because they are lit from all angles by that fireball. Moving on to the wizard's face, I use the Aubergine 028 to shade the features and establish the darkest areas of the face. I don't want this color to cover everything, I just want to establish a deep violet in the shadows and curvatures of the forms. With Sepia 070, I color over the Aubergine, working lightly into the white space, but being very gentle with the pressure. The goal is to allow the warm red tint of the sepia to dull and brown the violet of the Aubergine, while adding a hint of brown to the lighter areas of the face. Yellow Ochre Light 010 is applied over the top of both and lightly shaded into the white of the face to add a bit of a yellow-brown tint, and to bring us closer to the final highlight areas. Primrose Yellow 002 is finally brought in to burnish and blend the layers, being sure to maintain the small white highlights in the cheeks and nose, while also adding a bit of a sickly yellow to the wizard's flesh. The wizard's eyes are colored in with Cool Gray 065 and darkened with Burnt Umber 068. The wizard's necklace and bracelets are colored with Phthalo Green 050, Teal Green Light 049, Cobalt Turquoise 048, and Scarlet Red 022. With the wizard completed, we can move on to the final element of our image, the cleric. The cleric's skin is composed of mulberry 039, aubergine 028, terracotta 013, terracotta light 011, and primrose yellow 002. I begin by lightly shading the darker areas of the cleric's skin with mulberry 039, creating a subtle violet tone. Using aubergine 028, I continue to shade lightly, deepening the established shadows and spreading a slightly more red-violet tone into the skin. With terracotta 013, I lightly lay in the warmer reds of the skin, again going over what has already been colored and expanding outward. Terracotta Light 011 brings a yellow-brown tone to the skin and helps to neutralize some of the violet colors we have already used. Primrose Yellow 002 provides the lightest yellow transition of the skin colors into the white highlights. Now that all of the skin has been gently layered, I go back to the cleric's ear and repeat the process starting with mulberry 039 and firmer pressure, while keeping in mind that some areas are going to be darker than others and will not receive the full range of colors. Continue to finalize the cleric's skin using the same range of colors and firmer pressure on your pencils. As I further define the rim lighting on the cleric, I decide to add Burnt Ochre 014 to the Brilliant Yellow 009 for more of a firelight look. The cleric's eyes get colored with Phthalo Green 050 in the darker areas and Lemon Yellow 005 in the lighter areas. Next up, I tackle the cleric's gloves, robe, and boots. These are colored with Aubergine 028, Cherry 027, Cadmium Red 024, and Scarlet Red 022. Because I do not want to make any of these items shiny, I start by applying a light base of Cadmium Red 024 over every one of these elements. Note that the line patterns in the cleric's robe, the boots, and the gloves, along with the shoulder cowl, will have different colors. I will use the cleric's glove to demonstrate this part of the process. First, I establish the darkest darks with Aubergine 028, pressing hard to create solid lines and using less pressure to lightly and subtly shade towards the light. Using cadmium red 024, I lightly color and shape the forms in the glove around the forearm and the hand while still maintaining less toned areas for the scarlet red 022 to fill in. This also helps to further push the red hue of the glove before bringing in Cherry 027 to further push the dark areas and blend into the red. Scarlet Red 022 covers the rest, blending outward from the established hues toward the lightest areas. Finally, Brilliant Yellow 009 is brought in on top of the glove, which is receiving light directly from the fireball, and a mix of Brilliant Yellow 009 and Burnt Ochre 014 on the underside for rim lighting from the fireball. I repeat this process for the robe, the other glove, and the boots. The cleric's tunic and inner robes are colored with phthalo green 050, teal green light 049, and cobalt turquoise 048. Starting with the phthalo green 050, I shade the cloth using firm pressure in the dark areas and gradually easing off as I move toward the lightest areas. I leave areas white in this stage for the lighter colors to have full effect. Teal green light 049 is used to deepen the value and hue of the cloth, leaving light areas which are then colored with cobalt turquoise. The lightest areas of the cloth are already lightly colored with brilliant yellow 009, and now I bring it back to deepen the color there. There is only the slightest hint of white highlights on the cloth when it is finished. I will be coming back to apply the rim lighting on the bottom edge later with brilliant yellow 009 and burnt ochre 014, just as I did previously with the red elements. First, however, I will color all of the cloth with this mix of green and blue. The trim of the cleric's gloves and boots, as well as the shoulder cowl and the pattern on her robe, are essentially white, but they are tinted with teal green light 049 and cobalt turquoise 048. Teal green light 049 is applied with pressure to designate the darkest area before rim lighting, or a fold, while cobalt turquoise 048 is applied more gently and to a small area to suggest the transition from shadow to light. Brilliant yellow 009 is applied to suggest light coming from the fireball on any edges that might be able to catch that illumination. The cleric's medallion, knee pads, and belt are gold. Sticking with the same gold palette we established earlier, these are colored with burnt umber 068, burnt ochre 014, brilliant yellow 009, and lemon yellow 005. This time, I begin by lightly shading each element with the burnt umber 068, adding subtle form to the basic shapes and dark shadow transitions on the back edges. Burnt ochre 014 is lightly laid over the burnt umber to bring more orange into the browns, while making sure to leave plenty of room for the yellows to shine. Brilliant yellow is next, laid lightly over everything that has already been colored, creating a golden base and lightly extending towards the white highlights. With lemon yellow 005, I define the pure white highlights and blend back into the brilliant yellow. I come back with the brilliant yellow and apply more pressure to really add the gold color to these elements. Adding in a bit more burnt ochre 014 in the darker areas, the golden oranges really start to pop out and the burnt umber is blended a bit more into the overall color. I used the burnt umber 068 one more time to punch up the darkest darks before making one last pass with the brilliant yellow 009. The cleric's hair is colored with burnt umber 068, aubergine 028, terracotta 013, and terracotta light 011. I begin the hair and eyebrows with a light covering of terracotta light 011, I then gently shade with Terracotta 013, moving from dark to light and beginning to suggest the form of the hair. I deepen the shadows with Aubergine 028 and begin adding additional hair strokes. The Burnt Umber 068 is used to push the darkest areas to more of a brown tone and add darker hair strokes. Brilliant Yellow is applied to the top and left edges of the hair for rim lighting from the fireball. Glancing over the image, I feel like the characters need to be casting shadows to help ground them in the scene a bit better. Using Aubergine 028, I sketch and color the shadows of the wizard and the cleric along the deck boards. To deepen the shadows near their origin points, I use Burnt Umber 068. And with that, the image is fully colored. I would love to know what your favorite coloring tools are or your favorite type of coloring images. Let me know in the comments section. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you to all of my Patreon patrons and supporters who helped to make this content possible. If you enjoyed the video, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe for more exciting art-related content. Happy coloring! And on one final note, if you would like to get a copy of my fantasy coloring book for yourself, you can find it in my Etsy store at the link on the screen. Thank you again. See you next time.